Well, today on Twitter we were blocked by Education Scotland. Education Scotland, if you don't know, is the porn-promoting, discipline-undermining, indoctrinating, politicised, ideologically blinkered, social engineering, anti-academic, snowflake-generating, unaccountable education agency that imposes its hyper-progressive ideas on schools in Scotland, whether they like it or not. Now, I've had a few brushes with Education Scotland through my teaching career, so I thought, well, today's maybe a good time to tell you a little bit about them, to give you a bit more insight into the way that they operate. What used to happen in my teaching career is Education Scotland would come in to inspect the school where I worked. Then afterwards, the headmaster would ask to see me, and he'd say, Education Scotland said this about you. They're a bit concerned about something. Never say it to me, or they would always get it via the school. Well, what sort of things were they? I mean, one time they said they were concerned about my online profile, opinions I'd been expressing online. In particular, one time they said about creationism. I did a debate in the school once against the head of biology about evolution. Personally, I don't swallow the evolution theory hook, line and sinker. That's nothing to do with the family party. But anyway, so they picked up that I'd written about this sort of thing in newspapers as well. So they said to the headmaster, you need to consult with GTCS, the General Teaching Council for Scotland, to see how best to handle this member of staff. So just sort of putting pressure on the school, basically saying to the school, what are you going to do about this bloke? Implication, something needs to be done. I mean, another thing that came up, you can imagine me in a school. I would have an opinion to offer about the nature of personal social health education. I had an ongoing dialogue with the headmaster about these sort of issues. And one time the inspectors came in and they were aware that I'd been raising these issues and discussing them within the school. And they said that I appeared to be trying to undermine the head of personal, social and health education by offering a different perspective. So again, just trying to niggle, trying to just put pressure on the school, saying there's some sort of problem with me. Never explicit, never coming to me, nothing I could ever defend myself against. It was a little bit vague, but they just kept putting pressure on the school, I say, to do something about Richard Lucas. This came ahead a little bit in 2015 during the general election. I was a candidate in those days for UKIP, and we actually had an inspection in the school while the general election campaign was taking place. Now, one thing that the inspectors said to the headmaster was that they were surprised that the school had allowed me to stand as a candidate. Now, if the inspectors say they're surprised that you're doing something, that's code for, we don't think you ought to be doing that. So again, the implication was, why did you let this happen, headmaster? Why are you letting this teacher stand as a candidate for UKIP? On the other hand, lots of teachers in Scotland stand for election. The Scottish Parliament is full of ex-teachers, so there's quite a few of them. So if I'd have been standing for the SNP or for Labour or maybe even the Conservatives, I'm sure that would have been absolutely fine. But because it was UKIP, they're just putting pressure on the school, implying a criticism of the school for allowing me to stand for election. Right, the school, as many schools do, they have some mock election during the election campaign where the pupils go along and vote and they hear about the different parties. That's quite a good idea. So there was one of those scheduled during this inspection. Now, some people in the school said, don't do it. Education Scotland is totally politicised, they won't like the result, and they will be on our back because of it. But other people said, no, Education Scotland, we've got faith in them, we think they'll be reasonable, so we'll go ahead with our mock election. So the mock general election took place in the school. The result, if I remember rightly, was Conservatives won with 51% of the vote, and UKIP came second on 18% of the vote. So Education Scotland said to the headmaster about this result, they called him to account and said, how did this happen? Why has UKIP got so many votes in this school? Maybe it's because of this teacher that we're very concerned about. Maybe he's persuading all the boys in the school, or 18% of them at least, to vote UKIP. Can you please look into this, headmaster? Because we're not happy with this election result. So the headmaster looked into it. He asked a few boys what they thought about it. And eventually found a boy who said, people don't take the mock election very seriously. Maybe they just voted UKIP for a joke. So the headmaster went back to the inspectors and said, well, the boys said maybe people just, they don't take it seriously. Maybe they just voted UKIP as a joke. And the inspector replied, oh, well, if they're just voting UKIP as a joke, this teacher, this Richard Lucas, he mustn't be very highly regarded, must he? He must be a bit of a joke himself if they vote UKIP just as a joke. So it was my fault either way. Basically, that seemed to be the message. So Education Scotland were persisting in undermining my career, putting pressure on the school to do something about me, and basically to shut me up. Eventually it got to the stage where I'd had enough of this. So I complained, well, I didn't actually complain, but I contacted Education Scotland and said, look, this keeps happening. I said, if you've got concerns about me, then you tell me what they are, be open and transparent, and give me the right of reply. Stop just going behind my back and trying to undermine me with my employer. And so I wrote out an account of all the things that the headmaster had told me that Education Scotland had said, basically the things I've just told you, mainly. So I wrote out the text and I checked it with the headmaster. I said, can I just make it absolutely clear, this is what they said? Okay, this is what you remember them saying. He said, yes, very definitely. So I sent it to Education Scotland and said, look, I'm really not happy with this. How would you like to reply? They replied saying, our inspectors did not make those comments. They said they'd made a very general comment that they'd heard that I talked about politics quite a lot with the boys during the election campaign. Well, of course, I talked to the boys about politics, about religion, about philosophy, well, in a very responsible way, very definitely. But they denied all of the specific comments that had been reported to me. So I went back to the headmaster. I said, Education Scotland say they definitely didn't say these things. And the headmaster said, well, they did. So I went back to Education Scotland and said, I think we've got a serious issue here. I said, what seems to have happened is that your inspectors have come into the school, they've said things which on reflection they feel they shouldn't have said, and they're now trying to cover their tracks and deny that they said these things. So I said, what you need to do, you need to come into the school, speak to the headmaster, speak to other senior staff, get to the bottom of this, and then find out exactly what's happened. Because the integrity of Education Scotland is in doubt here. So Education Scotland said, yes, okay, very definitely, we'll investigate this thoroughly. So they came into the school and met with the headmaster and other senior staff. And then they wrote to me saying, we've met with the headmaster and we have agreed together that these things weren't said. I mean, this is like something from North Korea, isn't it? We have agreed together that these things were not said. So I went back to the headmaster, obviously, and said, I'm a bit confused here. Education Scotland say that these things weren't said, and the headmaster said, I didn't agree that. I did not say to them that these things were not said. So, okay, I said, well, will you please tell them? And the headmaster did. The headmaster contacted Education Scotland and said, I didn't retract these things. These are the things that I remember inspectors saying. And I went back to Education Scotland and said, look, I've completely lost faith in your integrity now, but I'm going to pursue my complaint. So the next level up is the Scottish Public Service Ombudsman. So I went to them, I explained to them what happened. They investigated it for, I can't remember how many weeks or months it took them. But at the end of it, they came back to me and said, well, we can't decide because it's one person's word against another. And as far as they were concerned, that was the end of the story. So there's a little insight into Education Scotland in action. These are the people responsible for, among other things, moral education in schools. Maybe that's why they're more keen on promoting pornography and all sorts of depraved sexual practices rather than teaching basic things like you tell the truth.